Chapter 2 A-Hunting We Will Go. Those first few years after the liberation, Dad continued, were a pretty crazy time. The Shovati landed and we didn't know what was going on until it was already over. Of course, Mom and Dad didn't make it because they blew Pearl Harbor off the map. San Diego, Seattle, Bremerton. Heck, they even hit the res because the Navy built that one water tower and it was listed as a naval installation. Grandpa took the news about the family up north pretty hard. So we joined the resistance in California with a bunch of psycho Juanitams. Darling, Mom's voice interrupted Dad's impending rant about the non-native human resistance fighters that was well known to the family. Already, she could see some of her siblings and cousins quoting it and laughing to each other. Dad gave a look that he'd pinned almost everyone in the room with at some point, a look of perturbed annoyance that was usually followed by the most dreaded action any of his children or their suitors had to survive as a rite of passage: the knife hand. They need to know it because it's part of the story, he grumped, to a point above and behind the camera, but he kept his weapon of mass instruction sheathed. When Mom didn't respond, he looked back at the camera and continued. So it was about 4 years later. Officer on deck! The voice of Gunny sounded out as she entered the briefing room. The call got their attention and snapped her entire pod out of their seats. Major Morona Narvaez raised a subtle eyebrow at the uncharacteristic formality from her squad's second. Gunny's eyes flicked mischievously toward the odd one out of her team of Shovati women. A tall Rakiri woman was standing in a neatly pressed uniform and holding an omnipad at her side, looking about as unsure as a Death's Head commando ever got. Laying it on thick for the new girl, eh? She straightened up as she strode over to the lectern to begin the briefing. She looked over the controls of the display before swiping a file from her omnipad over to it. New orders from Sector Command, Major Narvaez said seriously, playing along with whatever team-building exercise Gunny and the rest were putting on for their new pod sister. We're on convoy protection again, she started as the woman traded quiet glances. On the Redwoods run. The faces of her veterans crumpled at the news as the hologram brought up a map of the convoy routes and their checkpoints. Sergeant Trixea, their sniper, let out an audible groan. Ma'am, every time we go into those woods, we always get into some running gun battle, and we always catch shit from the sector governess's science pukes about the ecological damage in the debrief. The woman was easily the tallest of the bunch, with the exception of the Rakiri, and slender in her silver hair cropped short and a flat top. The inquest cleared us of wrongdoing for that forest fire last year. Besides, I heard the Marines cleared that area 3 weeks ago, Sergeant Crispy Valzano chimed in. Like the last 4 times they said that, the only way to clear that stretch of bush is to flatten it from orbit, and the ecology teams have put a ban on that particular easy fix, complained the squad's resident ray of sunshine, Sergeant Joyboy Boitalarna. Why can't the convoy bypass that route? I thought they repaired the bridge on the I-5 highway. The short, squat, barrel-chested tank with tusks that was Sergeant Dixania spoke in a low rumble. Resistance took it out again, Major Narvaez growled. So we're back on the coastal road for running supplies to the Marine and Interior outposts in the area. We've got another Marine convoy getting organized, and we'll be getting embedded with the escort as force multiplication. Morona gave each of them an appraising look. so play nice with the grunts. She waited a moment before continuing. Dicks and tricks, you're on Convoy 1, at the head of the column, she said, and the two smiled fairly. They always worked well together, especially when they got competitive over mission kill streaks. Joyboy and Crispy, you're with Convoy 2 with the heavy gear. At her words, Joyboy shot a glare over at Crispy. I swear to Crick, if you light me on fire again, the short, flat-chested woman bit out venomously. It was only twice. The stewards were able to buff the burn scoring out of your armor both times. Let it go, Crispy guffawed at the smaller woman's vitriol. Truther and Stitches are with Convoy 3 bringing up the rear of the column, Major Narvaez continued, shutting down the coming argument before it could really take off. Oh, come on! It's my turn to catch the cryptid! I'll catch her this time, I know it! Sergeant Truther Apollonia whined. I am not with her, Sergeant Stitches Yggdralania, their unit medic, said, raising both hands. I'll take the 4-day APC ride and like it, thank you. And that leaves Gunny and Sergeant Dinari with me, hunting in the benthic deeps, Narvaez finished, looking around at her number 2 and the new girl. The other 6 sucked in an audible breath and shook their heads in unison. The what? The Rakiri girl's ears twitched back as her tail lashed slightly, while Gunny looked over at Crispy and held out her hand, motioning for her to pay up. The Deep Minders' summer getaway. Stretch of road in the forest the Resistance loves to booby-trap and set ambushes in. The terrain makes comms spotty at best. The trees are so thick you can't land shuttles there, except the road, which makes them an easy target. And every time we've deployed there, equipment and rations always disappear, meaning we have to go foraging, Gunny said cheerfully as Crispy forked over 2 chocolate bars. Shuttle to the surface is in 30. Gird up, girls. I'll see you on the ready line in 15. Sergeant Dinari, I need a word, Narvaez said, dismissing the rest of them. She waited and watched her team shuffle out in silence. What do you think the cryptid's going to take from her? Crispy muttered loudly as she passed. 2 chocolate bars says it'll be her flea collar, Joyboy said loudly as she and the rest exited the room, leaving them alone. Ma'am, Sergeant Dinari began, snapping to a salute. Welcome to Pod 19, Sergeant, Narvaez said, moving around the lectern as it closed down. I'm sorry about not being able to meet with you when you came aboard, she said, holding up her omnipad. Right, my orders, the Rakiri started before bringing up her own and swiping a file over. Good. I wanted to talk to you about why I requested you right out of selection. Your background in marine reconnaissance is what I need for this operation, Narvaez said, leveling an appraising look as she perused the orders and ignored the dossier that she'd already memorized. I'll get right down to it, Sergeant. You're here to help me hunt down the man that killed the woman whose place you're taking. Give me his name and his scent. I'll hand him over with a neat little bow. The woman allowed a hint of predatory smile to grace her face. He's the leader of the resistance fighters in the AO. The benthic deep is his playground. Is this the cryptid the others were talking about? Sergeant Dinari asked. No, that's just Truther hoping and praying to see one of these human myths in real life. You'll learn pretty quickly that humans aren't the only thing that can cause problems on this little death world. There are several large predators and scavengers, all of which are clever enough to have learned how to steal food. Despite what Truther says, it's just plain old local wildlife, Narvaez replied with a dark chuckle. If you haven't already, read the memos to all personnel on Earth, especially the one about bears. The sergeant nodded. So, this human? Intel figures he wants us to keep moving through his little patch of woods. With the curfews and the increased patrols in the town and villages surrounding his normal hunting ground, it's figured he gets his resupply by hitting our convoys. He never operates with more than a team of 12, but they're all experienced military. I need you to help us track him down in his favorite part of the woods and avenge our fallen sister. You can count on me, ma'am, Daenerys said, snapping a salute again. So, the new girl seems keen, Gunny said, greeting the major as she entered the armory. How are the girls taking to our new fuzzy sister? Narvaez asked as she stripped out of her day uniform to get into her armor. Mixed. They're waiting to see how she handles these suicidally murderous human males. She seems to have done her research, though. Speaking of which, any news on that lovely little number the matchmaking service tried to set you up with? Gunny said with a lecherous smile as she secured one of her stealth plates to her chest. I don't want to talk about it, Narvaez grumbled as she started to gear herself up, stepping over the bench that ran in front of her locker. Oh no, not again. There was a definite laugh in Gunny's tone that bit deeper than usual. Yeah, gets worse though. Narvaez sat down heavily and cradled her head in her hands as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. After a moment, she felt a hand on her shoulder. They dropped you, didn't they? Gunny's tone was conciliatory, all levity gone as Narvaez's oldest friend tried to offer her comfort. They said I was uncommitted to the process. When I tried explaining that I'm in the service and on deployment, their response was, our clients marry ladies, not professionals. If your chosen vocation doesn't lend itself to your even attending a first introduction, then perhaps you must examine your priorities. Clam-sucking shit swizzlers. That's what, the third service to drop you? Gunny asked, cursing with vehemence as she sat down next to her. The fourth, Narvaez replied, glaring at her second in command as the woman brushed her short black hair back. No, Gunny exclaimed in shock before giving her shoulder a squeeze. She stood up and started pulling Narvaez's gear out to speed up the process. I mean, if you need a lay that badly, spend the next shell over in that Japan sector again. Maybe do a Hail Hele and actually proposition that cute little butler in that cafe you practically lived in last year. I don't want dick, you vulgar clam. I want a husband and wives and children. I want 3 to 5 co's who I'll argue with about how much time we spend with our man. I want a platoon of girls I can teach to fight and maybe a boy or two I can spoil. Narvaez wailed plaintively as she forced herself to move through the now unconscious routine of putting on her armor. Your lips to Thoira's ears. I bet you want that house looking out over the water with a big old pool to go with it, eh? Gunny added with a grin as she helped apply her own stealth plates. Friendly neighbors in a quiet area away from the city, Gunny added, pulling her helmet out of the locker and tucking it under her arm and turning to her friend. What's wrong with the city? She asked, tossing her rifle to her. No child of mine will grow up in the slums like I did. To the deeps with those shitholes like Kriantari. I want a place that's close to a good-sized town, but far away for it to be safe for the kids to play outside. Narvaez bit out in a determined tone as the two of them strode out towards the shuttle hangar. It'll happen. Ellie likes you too much to let you be single forever. Gunny hoisted her heavy repeater over her shoulder. I think I keep burning all of my favors with her every time we go on a mission. And I've never even been on a second date ever. I've never been any kind of looker, and the only thing going for me is that I can offer the steady paycheck. Each near miss adds another scar or burn or some other imperfection that any respectable male just looks at and winces, Narvaez huffed, squaring herself away as they approached the bulkhead door to the hangar. Then maybe it's time to hang it up. Nobles always love to hire officers. You could be a retainer or go into a private militia in the core colonies. You'd make bank and ride a desk with plenty of time for all the nice things we can only dream of. The door opened to the echoing sound of the maintenance crews tending their birds. And give up chocolate and firefights? Have you taken leave of your senses? Narvaez demanded as she compartmentalized her frustrations and strode forward, once again the Major. Well, if you really want kids, you always have this pot of reprobates, Gunny said cheekily as her girls came into view, standing by the door of the shuttle as the pilots ran their checks.